The sound of her father's hand striking the wooden table echoed through the grand dining room like a gunshot, but Amelia Wells refused to flinch even as her mother gasped and her two younger sisters shrank back in their chairs. It was August 1885, and in the prosperous ranching town of Caldwell, Idaho, where her father controlled more land than any other man for 50 miles, speaking against Charles Wells was considered not just disrespectful but dangerous. "You will not speak of such things under my roof," her father bellowed, his face reddening beneath his perfectly groomed silver beard. "I will not have my own daughter questioning my business dealings or suggesting I treat those men with anything more than what they deserve." Amelia stood from her chair, her napkin falling to the floor, her hands trembling but her voice steady. "They are human beings, Father. The men who work our land deserve fair wages and proper shelter. What you are doing is wrong, and you know it." Her mother reached out a hand toward her, desperation in her eyes. "Amelia, please sit down." But Charles Wells rose to his full height, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the table. "You have exactly 1 hour to gather what you can carry. You are no longer welcome in this house. If you cannot respect your father, if you cannot understand that a woman has no place questioning a man's decisions, then you have no place in this family." The silence that followed felt suffocating. Amelia looked at her mother, hoping for some intervention, some defense, but Margaret Wells only lowered her eyes to her plate. Her sisters, Catherine and Dorothy, both younger by several years, sat frozen with tears streaming down their faces. "Father, surely you do not mean—" Catherine began, but their father silenced her with a look. "1 hour," he repeated, his voice like iron. "And if I see you on my land after that, I will have the ranch hands remove you by force." Amelia felt her heart hammering in her chest, but she lifted her chin and met her father's cold gaze. "I would rather sleep under the stars than under the roof of a man who treats others with such cruelty." She turned and walked from the dining room with as much dignity as she could muster, her footsteps echoing on the polished wooden floors of the home where she had lived all 22 years of her life. In her bedroom, she pulled out a worn leather satchel and began packing with shaking hands. A few dresses, her mother's Bible that had been given to her when she turned 18, the small amount of money she had saved from selling her embroidery work in town, a photograph of her sisters, and a warm shawl. Everything else, all the fine things her father's money had bought, she left behind. Her mother appeared in the doorway, wringing her hands. "Amelia, if you would just apologize, if you would just—" "I will not apologize for speaking the truth, Mother." Amelia fastened her satchel and turned to face the woman who had raised her. "How can you stand by and watch him treat people so poorly? Those families have children who are hungry while he builds another stable for his prized horses." Margaret Wells closed her eyes, a single tear sliding down her cheek. "You do not understand what it means to be a wife, to maintain peace in a household. Your father provides for us, protects us." "At what cost?" Amelia asked softly. "At the cost of our souls?" Her mother had no answer, and when the hour was up, Amelia walked down the grand staircase one final time. Her father stood in the entrance hall with his arms crossed, watching her as though she were a stranger. Catherine and Dorothy rushed forward to embrace her, sobbing, but he ordered them back with a sharp word. The heavy oak door closed behind her with a finality that made her knees weak. The sun was setting over the Idaho landscape, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, and for the first time in her life, Amelia Wells had nowhere to go. She walked down the long drive that led from the house to the main road, her satchel growing heavier with each step. The Wells Ranch sprawled for thousands of acres, and the workers' quarters were visible in the distance, small ramshackle buildings that her father refused to repair. It was her vocal defense of these workers at dinner, her insistence that they deserved better treatment, that had finally pushed her father beyond tolerance. He had been growing increasingly angry with her questions and observations over the past months, but tonight she had spoken in front of guests, had embarrassed him before other wealthy ranchers, and that he could not forgive. The road to town was 5 miles, and darkness was falling fast. Amelia had never been alone outside at night, had never walked anywhere without a chaperone or an escort. Fear crept up her spine, but she forced herself to keep moving forward. She had made her choice, and she would face whatever came. She had walked perhaps 2 miles when she heard the sound of hoofbeats approaching from behind. Her heart leaped into her throat, wondering if her father had sent men after her, but when she turned, she saw a single rider approaching at an easy pace. As he drew closer in the dimming light, she could make out a tall figure on a paint horse, wearing a dusty hat and range clothes that marked him as a working cowboy rather than a wealthy rancher. The rider slowed as he approached, and in the last rays of sunlight, Amelia could see he was young, perhaps close to her own age, with tanned skin and eyes that seemed kind even in the shadows. He touched the brim of his hat in a respectful gesture. "Evening, miss. It is not safe for a lady to be walking alone on this road after dark." His voice was deep and gentle, with a slight drawl that suggested he had come from further south. Amelia straightened her shoulders, trying to appear more confident than she felt. "I appreciate your concern, but I am quite capable of taking care of myself." The cowboy studied her for a moment, and she noticed he had strong features and dark hair that curled slightly at the edges from beneath his hat. "I do not doubt your capability, miss, but there are dangers on these roads at night. Wolves, occasional bandits, and the terrain can be treacherous in the dark. I am headed into Caldwell if you are going that way. I would be happy to offer you a ride, or at least escort you on foot if you would prefer." There was something honest in his manner that made Amelia want to trust him, though she knew she should be wary of strangers. But what choice did she have? Pride would not protect her from the very real dangers he had mentioned. "I am going to town," she admitted, "though I confess I have not thought much beyond that." He swung down from his horse with an easy grace, landing lightly on his feet. Up close, she could see he was indeed young, probably no more than 24 or 25, with broad shoulders and calloused hands that spoke of hard work. "My name is Benjamin Baker. I work for the Miller Ranch, about 15 miles north of here. I have been in Boise for a cattle sale and am heading back through Caldwell." "Amelia Wells," she replied, then wished she had not given her real name. Her father's reputation would precede her. Recognition flickered in Benjamin's eyes, but to her surprise, he did not react with judgment. "Wells, I see. Would I be correct in assuming you are no longer welcome at the ranch?" His directness caught her off guard. "How did you—" "I have heard things about Charles Wells," Benjamin said quietly, "about how he treats his workers, and I can see from your satchel and the direction you are walking that you left in a hurry. A woman does not generally walk away from that kind of wealth unless she has no other choice, or unless she is a person of principle." Amelia felt tears prick at her eyes, the first she had allowed since leaving. "I spoke against him, against his treatment of the workers. He gave me an hour to leave." Benjamin was quiet for a moment, then he said something that made her heart contract with unexpected emotion. "Speaking truth takes courage." Those 4 words, spoken with such simple sincerity, nearly undid her. She blinked rapidly, refusing to cry in front of this stranger, no matter how kind he seemed. "Here," Benjamin said gently, leading his horse closer. "Ranger is gentle and will not mind carrying both of us. It is still a few miles to town, and you must be exhausted." Amelia wanted to refuse out of propriety, but her feet were already aching in her fine leather boots that had never been meant for distance walking. "That is very kind of you, Mr. Baker. Just Benjamin, please." He helped her up onto the horse with a steady hand, then swung up behind her, careful to keep a respectful distance. "Hold on to the saddle horn and do not worry. Ranger knows the way." They rode in silence for a while, the horse moving at a comfortable walk through the gathering darkness. Amelia was acutely aware of Benjamin's presence behind her, the warmth of him in the cooling evening air, the careful way he held the reins so as not to jostle her. "Do you have somewhere to stay in town?" he asked eventually. "I have some money," Amelia replied, though in truth she had no idea if it would be enough for more than a few nights at a boarding house. I will find something. Mrs. Patterson runs a respectable boarding house near the church. She is fair with her prices and particular about keeping things proper. I can take you there if you like. You seem to know the town well. I pass through regularly enough, and I knew of your father's ranch, of course. Everyone does. He paused, then added carefully, I have seen some of the workers in town, buying supplies at the mercantile. They speak in low voices about the conditions, about the wages. It takes courage to stand up to a man like that, especially when he is your own father. It seems courage has cost me my home and my family, Amelia said, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. Perhaps, Benjamin said thoughtfully, or perhaps it has given you something more valuable. Your integrity. She turned her head slightly to look back at him in the moonlight that had begun to illuminate the road. That is a generous way of viewing homelessness and poverty. I did not say it would be easy, but I believe that who we are matters more than where we come from or how much money we have, though I know that is easier said from someone who has never known great wealth. You think I will miss the luxury? Amelia asked, feeling defensive. No, Benjamin said simply. I think you are the kind of person who already knew there were more important things. Otherwise, you would have kept silent. His words warmed something inside her that had felt frozen since that terrible moment at dinner. They rode on through the darkness, and Amelia found herself relaxing slightly against the gentle rhythm of the horse's gait. Why did you stop to help me? She asked. You could have ridden past. Benjamin was quiet for a moment. My mother always taught me that how we treat others, especially those in need, is the measure of our character. And besides, I could see you were in trouble. What kind of man would I be if I just rode on by? Many men would have. Then many men are fools. The lights of Caldwell came into view, the small but growing town nestled in the valley. It was nothing compared to the grandeur of her father's ranch, but right now it looked like salvation. Benjamin guided Ranger down the main street, quiet at this hour, with most businesses closed for the night. He stopped in front of a neat two-story house with a sign that read Patterson's Boarding House in careful letters. Benjamin dismounted first, then helped Amelia down. Her legs felt shaky after the ride and the emotional turmoil of the evening. He retrieved her satchel from where it had been secured behind the saddle and handed it to her. Wait here a moment, he said, and walked up to knock on the door. A middle-aged woman with gray-streaked hair and a kind face appeared, still dressed despite the late hour. Benjamin spoke to her in low tones, and Amelia saw the woman glance her way several times, her expression shifting from curiosity to understanding to sympathy. Finally, Mrs. Patterson nodded and beckoned Amelia forward. Come in, dear, the woman said warmly. Mr. Baker has explained your situation. I have a room available and we can discuss the details in the morning. You look exhausted. Benjamin touched his hat brim again in that respectful gesture. Mrs. Patterson will take good care of you. Wait, Amelia said as he turned to go. I have not properly thanked you. You did not have to help me, and I am grateful. He smiled, and it transformed his serious face into something quite handsome. No thanks necessary, but if you need anything, Mrs. Patterson knows how to reach the Miller Ranch. I pass through town every few weeks or so. Then he was gone, swinging back up onto Ranger and riding off into the night, leaving Amelia standing in the doorway with a strange feeling in her chest that she could not quite name. Mrs. Patterson led her inside to a small but clean room on the second floor. There is water in the pitcher if you want to wash up, dear. Breakfast is at 7, but I can make you some tea now if you are hungry. Thank you, but I think I just need to sleep. Amelia set down her satchel and sat on the edge of the narrow bed. How much will the room cost per week? Mrs. Patterson named a price that was more than fair, and Amelia quickly calculated that she had enough for perhaps a month if she was very careful. After that, she would need to find work, though she had no idea what kind of employment a woman with her limited practical skills could find in a town like Caldwell. Do not worry about payment tonight, Mrs. Patterson said gently. We will sort everything out in the morning. Mr. Baker is a good judge of character, and he said you were a person of principle. That is good enough for me. After the woman left, Amelia finally allowed herself to cry, quietly so as not to disturb the other boarders. She cried for the loss of her family, for the sister she might never see again, for the mother too weak to stand up for her, and for the father whose love had always come with conditions. But underneath the grief was something else, something that felt almost like relief. She had spoken her truth, had stood up for what she believed was right, and whatever came next, at least she would face it with her integrity intact. The morning sun woke her, streaming through the thin curtains. For a moment, Amelia forgot where she was, expecting to see her elegant bedroom with its fine furniture and thick carpets. Instead, she saw bare wooden walls and simple furnishings, and reality came crashing back. She washed her face in the basin and changed into a fresh dress, one of the simpler ones she had packed. When she came downstairs, she found a dining room where several other boarders were already eating breakfast. Mrs. Patterson greeted her warmly and showed her to a seat, serving her eggs and toast and strong coffee. So, what are your plans, dear? Mrs. Patterson asked when Amelia had finished eating. I need to find work, Amelia said directly. I have some money, but it will not last forever. I can read and write and do figures. I am skilled with a needle. Are there any positions available in town that you know of? Mrs. Patterson considered this, tapping her finger against her chin. Mrs. Henderson at the dress shop might need help, and the school teacher, Miss Evans, has been looking for someone to help with the younger children since the school has been growing. Let me make some inquiries for you. Over the next few days, Amelia settled into a strange new routine. Mrs. Patterson did indeed speak to Mrs. Henderson, and Amelia found herself employed at the dress shop, mending clothes and helping with alterations. The work was hard and the hours long, but she earned enough to pay for her room and board with a little left over. It was nothing compared to the life she had known, but there was a satisfaction in earning her own way that she had never experienced before. She tried not to think about her family, about whether her sisters missed her or if her mother regretted not speaking up. She tried not to wonder if her father ever thought about her at all. But late at night, alone in her small room, the questions haunted her. 2 weeks after her arrival in Caldwell, Amelia was walking back to the boarding house after a long day at the dress shop when she saw a familiar paint horse tied outside the general store. Her heart gave an unexpected leap, and she found herself smoothing her hair and checking that her dress was not too wrinkled. She told herself she was being foolish, that Benjamin Baker had simply been kind to a stranger in need and had likely not thought of her since. But when she entered the store to buy some thread, there he was, talking to the proprietor about an order of grain. He turned when the bell above the door chimed, and his face lit up with genuine pleasure when he saw her. Miss Wells, how are you? Have you been well? I am managing, Amelia said, surprised by how glad she was to see him. And please call me Amelia. After everything, I think we can dispense with such formality. Then you must call me Benjamin. He paid for his order and followed her as she selected the thread she needed. I have been wondering how you were getting on. Mrs. Patterson mentioned you found work at the dress shop. You asked about me? He had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. I wanted to make sure you were all right. I hope that does not seem too forward. It seems kind, Amelia said honestly. I have not had much kindness lately. They walked out of the store together, and Benjamin untied Ranger, but did not mount immediately. Have you eaten dinner? I was about to go to the hotel restaurant. It is not fancy, but the food is good. Would you join me? Amelia knew she should say no, knew that dining alone with a man she barely knew was improper. But propriety had gotten her cast out from her home. Besides, she found she very much wanted to spend more time with Benjamin. I would like that, she said. The hotel restaurant was indeed simple, but the stew was hot and filling, and the bread was fresh. They sat at a corner table, and for the first time since leaving her father's house, Amelia felt almost at ease. Tell me about the Miller Ranch, she said. What is it like working there? Benjamin's face softened. It is a good place. Mr. Miller treats his workers fairly, pays decent wages, provides proper housing. He believes that if you take care of your people, they will take care of your land and your cattle. It makes for a loyal crew. That sounds wonderful, Amelia said wistfully. How different from what I witnessed at home. Your father's reputation is well known in these parts, Benjamin said carefully. Though no one speaks of it openly, of course. He has too much power, too much influence. He certainly has power over his own family, Amelia said bitterly. My mother and sisters are terrified of him. I was too for a long time, but I could not stay silent anymore, not when I saw how those workers were suffering. Benjamin reached across the table and briefly touched her hand, a gesture of comfort that sent warmth through her entire body. You did the right thing, even though it cost you dearly. They talked for hours, long after they had finished eating. Benjamin told her about growing up in Texas, about losing his parents to fever when he was 16 and making his way north, looking for work. He spoke of learning the cowboy trade, of the hard work and long hours, but also the satisfaction of working with horses and cattle, of sleeping under the stars and living close to the land. Amelia found herself sharing things she had never told anyone about how confined she had always felt in her father's house, how she had spent hours reading books about far-off places and different ways of living. She told him about her sisters, about hoping they would find the courage to think for themselves someday, even if they could not speak up as she had done. You miss them, Benjamin observed. Terribly, Amelia admitted. But I cannot go back. Even if my father would allow it, which he would not, I could not live that way again. Not now that I know there is another way. There is always another way, Benjamin said, though finding it takes courage. There was that word again. Courage. Something about the way he said it made her feel stronger, more capable. When he finally walked her back to the boarding house, the moon was high and bright. They stood outside the door, neither quite wanting to say goodbye. When will you be back in town? Amelia asked. Not for another 2 weeks, most likely. We are moving cattle to new grazing land. But may I write to you? Mrs. Patterson would hold letters for you. I would like that very much. He smiled, that transformative smile that made her heart flutter. Then I will write. Take care of yourself, Amelia. She watched him ride away, and something had shifted inside her. She barely knew this man, and yet she felt more connected to him than she had ever felt to anyone in her father's social circle, where conversations were always about appearances and never about anything real. True to his word, a letter arrived the following week. Benjamin wrote about his work, about the beauty of the Idaho landscape, about a new foal that had been born on the ranch. His words were simple but genuine, and Amelia read the letter 3 times before carefully folding it and tucking it into the Bible her mother had given her. She wrote back, telling him about her work at the dress shop, about the satisfaction of earning her own way, about the books she was borrowing from the small-town library. Their letters became a regular exchange, something she looked forward to more than she cared to admit. A month after leaving her father's house, Amelia was working alone in the dress shop one afternoon when the door opened and her mother walked in. Margaret Wells looked older than Amelia remembered, her face drawn and tired. They stared at each other for a long moment. Mother, Amelia finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. Your father does not know I am here, Margaret said quickly. He thinks I am visiting Mrs. Thompson. I only have a few minutes. How are Catherine and Dorothy? They miss you terribly. Dorothy cries herself to sleep most nights. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. Amelia, please, if you would just apologize to your father, just tell him you were wrong. But I was not wrong, Amelia said firmly, though her heart ached at the thought of her little sister crying. What father is doing is wrong. Surely you can see that. It does not matter what I see. Margaret's voice rose slightly, then dropped again as she glanced toward the door. I am his wife. My duty is to support him, not to question him. Even when he is cruel, even when he causes suffering. Margaret looked away. You do not understand. You never married, never had to learn how to navigate a household, how to keep peace. I would rather have conflict than complicity, Amelia said sadly. I am sorry, Mother. I cannot be the daughter Father wants me to be. Then you are no daughter of mine, Margaret said, but her voice broke on the words. Your father has said your name is not to be spoken in our house. As far as he is concerned, you no longer exist. Perhaps that is easier for everyone, Amelia said, though each word felt like a knife. Easier than admitting there might be another way to live. Margaret pulled something from her purse, a small bundle wrapped in cloth. Here, some money. Your embroidery earnings that were still in your room. And a letter from Catherine and Dorothy. I should not be giving you these. But her voice broke completely. Thank you, Mother. Amelia took the bundle, her own eyes wet with tears. I have to go. If he finds out I came here. Margaret moved toward the door, then turned back. That cowboy who brought you to town, the one Mrs. Patterson mentioned to her friend, who mentioned it to someone else until the whole town knew. People say he is a good man. He is, Amelia said quietly. Then perhaps, Margaret shook her head. Goodbye, Amelia. She was gone before Amelia could respond, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than any words. Amelia stood in the empty shop, clutching the bundle, and allowed herself to cry for a few minutes before composing herself and returning to work. That evening, she opened the letter from her sisters. Catherine's neat handwriting filled the first page with news of the household, careful not to say anything critical of their father. Between the lines, Amelia could read her sister's pain and confusion. Dorothy's shorter note was more direct, telling Amelia she missed her and asking when she could come home, clearly not understanding that home was no longer an option. Benjamin's next letter arrived 2 days later, and in it, Amelia poured out the story of her mother's visit, of the pain of being disowned even more formally, of the ache of separation from her sisters. His response came quickly, full of comfort and understanding, and she realized she had come to depend on these letters, on this connection with someone who seemed to truly see her. When Benjamin next came to town 3 weeks later, Amelia had been living in Caldwell for nearly 2 months. She had become adept at her work in the dress shop, and Mrs. Henderson had increased her wages slightly. She had also begun helping Miss Evans at the school twice a week, teaching the younger children their letters. Life had developed a rhythm, and while it was vastly different from everything she had known, there was a peace in it. She was teaching a little girl to form her letters one afternoon when Benjamin appeared in the schoolhouse doorway, hat in hand. Miss Evans looked up from her work with the older students and smiled knowingly. Mr. Baker, how nice to see you. Amelia, why do not you take a short break? Amelia felt her cheeks warm as she stood and walked to the door. Benjamin's eyes lit up when he saw her, and she could not help but smile in return. I did not know you were helping at the school, he said as they stepped outside into the bright afternoon sun. Miss Evans needed assistance, and I enjoy working with the children. They are so eager to learn. She studied him, noticing he looked tired. How have you been? Your last letter mentioned some trouble with wolves. We lost a few calves, but we have dealt with the pack now. It is part of ranching. He shifted his hat in his hands. Amelia, I have been thinking. Mr. Miller is looking for someone to help his wife with the household. Mrs. Miller has been unwell, and they need someone who can help with cooking, cleaning, managing the house. The pay would be better than what you earn at the dress shop, and you would have your own cabin on the ranch property. I know it is presumptuous of me to suggest, and if you are happy with your current situation, please say so, but You thought you could help me again, Amelia said softly. I thought you might enjoy the work more and the circumstances might be better. But also, I confess, I would like to see you more often. Our letters have become very important to me, and the weeks between seeing you feel very long. Her heart was pounding. They feel long to me, too. Benjamin looked at her with such open affection that she felt breathless. Then would you at least meet Mrs. Miller? Let her tell you about the position herself? Yes, Amelia said, I would like that. The following Saturday, Benjamin arrived early in the morning with a wagon to take her to the Miller Ranch. The drive took about 2 hours through beautiful country, rolling hills and meadows dotted with cattle. Benjamin pointed out landmarks and told her stories about the land, and Amelia felt more relaxed than she had in months. The Miller Ranch was substantial but not ostentatious like her father's holdings. The main house was a large, comfortable-looking structure surrounded by well-maintained outbuildings, corrals, and several small cabins that Benjamin explained housed the ranch workers and their families. Mr. Miller was a man in his 50s with graying hair and a weathered face that crinkled kindly when he smiled. His wife, Emma, was a small woman with gentle eyes, who did indeed look unwell, moving slowly and with obvious pain. Mrs. Wells, thank you for coming all this way, Emma said, as they sat in the comfortable parlor. Benjamin has spoken highly of you, and we trust his judgment. Let me tell you what I am looking for. She explained that she had been ill for several months, something the doctors could not quite figure out, and while she was slowly improving, she needed help managing the household. The ranch employed several cowboys, and meals needed to be prepared, laundry done, the house kept clean. She also needed help with correspondence and managing the household accounts. I can do all of that, Amelia said confidently. I may not have done manual labor before recently, but I learned quickly, and I am quite good with figures and writing. Emma smiled. Benjamin said you were capable. The position includes room and board in one of the cabins and a salary that is quite generous. She named a figure that was nearly 3 times what Amelia was currently making between her 2 jobs. That seems more than fair, Amelia said, stunned. We believe in paying people properly for their work, Mr. Miller said, from where he stood by the window. Benjamin tells us you understand the value of that. They showed her the cabin that would be hers, a small but charming one-room structure with a good stove, a comfortable bed, a table and chairs, and even some bookshelves. It was simple but clean and well-maintained, with windows that looked out over the meadow. The other workers are good people, Emma explained. We have 3 families who live on the property year-round, and several single men, including Benjamin, who have cabins as well. Everyone looks out for each other here. We are like a small community. Amelia made her decision quickly. I would be honored to accept the position. When would you like me to start? As soon as you can, Emma said with obvious relief. If you need time to settle things in town, I can start Monday, Amelia said. She had only a few possessions, and while she would miss Mrs. Patterson and the friends she had made in Caldwell, this felt like the right move. On the drive back to town, Benjamin was quiet for a while, then said, I hope I did not overstep. I just thought you would be happier here, doing work that uses more of your skills, and the Millers are genuinely good people. You will be treated well. You did not overstep, Amelia assured him, though I am beginning to wonder why you keep helping me. He glanced at her, and there was something vulnerable in his expression. Is it not obvious? Her breath caught. Perhaps I need to hear it said plainly. I am drawn to you, Amelia. From that first night when I saw you walking alone on that road, refusing to show fear even though you must have been terrified. Your courage, your principles, the way you speak your mind and stand up for what is right even when it costs you everything. I have never met anyone like you. The truth is, I suggested you for this position partly to help you, yes, but also because I wanted you closer. I wanted the chance to know you better, to see if what I feel might be something you feel too. Amelia's heart soared. I feel it too. I have felt it growing with every letter, every conversation. I barely know you, Benjamin Baker, and yet I feel I know you better than anyone I have ever met. He pulled the wagon to a stop right there in the middle of the road, and turned to face her fully. Then may I court you properly, with the intention of seeing if we might have a future together? Yes, she said, and when he took her hand, she felt as though everything that had been broken was being made whole. She gave notice at the dress shop and the school, both Mrs. Henderson and Miss Evans understanding and wishing her well. Mrs. Patterson hugged her tightly and made her promise to visit. By Monday morning, all her worldly possessions were packed into Benjamin's wagon, and she was moving to the Miller ranch. The work was indeed demanding. Emma Miller was kind, but had high standards, and there was much to be done. Amelia rose early to help prepare breakfast for the ranch hands, cleaned the house, did laundry, helped with meal planning and preparation. But Emma also taught her to make bread and preserve fruit, to manage household accounts, and to negotiate with suppliers. These were practical skills Amelia had never learned in her privileged upbringing, and she absorbed them eagerly. In the evenings, Benjamin would often stop by her cabin, and they would sit on the small porch and talk as the sun set over the mountains. He told her more about his life, about his dreams of one day having his own small ranch. Nothing grand, but enough to build a good life. She told him about the books she loved, about wanting to travel someday and see more of the world, about hoping her sisters would find their own courage eventually. Sometimes he would take her riding on Ranger, showing her the far reaches of the ranch property, teaching her to sit a horse properly and to appreciate the rhythms of ranch life. She learned to recognize different cattle brands, to understand the cycle of seasons that governed ranching, to see the land the way he did as something alive and beautiful. The other ranch workers and their families welcomed her warmly. The children especially took to her, and she found herself teaching them their letters on Sunday afternoons, enjoying their bright minds and eager questions. This life, so different from everything she had known, felt more authentic and satisfying than anything she had experienced growing up. She and Benjamin grew closer with each passing week. There were no grand gestures or elaborate courtship rituals, just the steady building of trust and affection. He was unfailingly respectful, always mindful of her reputation, but there was no mistaking the depth of his feelings or hers. When he held her hand or stood close to her, she felt a warmth and security she had never known. 2 months after she started working at the Miller Ranch, in late October, with the leaves turning gold and the air growing crisp, Benjamin asked her to go riding with him one Sunday afternoon. They rode to a high meadow with a view that stretched for miles, the mountains purple in the distance, and the valley spread below like a patchwork quilt. He helped her down from the horse and stood before her, taking both her hands in his. "Amelia, I know we have not known each other very long, only 4 months since that night on the road. But in those 4 months, I have come to care for you more deeply than I thought possible. You are brave and kind and smart and beautiful, and I cannot imagine my life without you in it." Her heart was racing as he dropped to one knee, pulling a simple gold band from his pocket. "I do not have much to offer you, no grand house or fine things, but I promise to work hard, to treat you as an equal partner, to honor your courage and your convictions. Will you marry me, Amelia? Will you build a life with me?" Tears streamed down her face, but they were tears of joy. "Yes, Benjamin, yes." He stood and pulled her into his arms, and when he kissed her for the first time, she felt as though every difficult step of the past months had led her exactly where she was meant to be. They were married 6 weeks later in the small church in Caldwell, with Mrs. Patterson and the Millers and all the ranch workers in attendance. Amelia wore a simple white dress that she had made herself, and Benjamin wore his best suit. She had written to her mother about the wedding, not expecting a response, and had received none. But Catherine had somehow managed to send a brief note of congratulation and love, which Amelia treasured. After the ceremony, there was a celebration at the Miller Ranch. Someone played a fiddle, and there was dancing and good food and laughter that lasted long into the night. Emma Miller had insisted on giving up the cabin Amelia had been living in to the newlyweds, having it cleaned and furnished with a proper double bed and new curtains. It was small but cozy, a home of their own. That first night as husband and wife, lying in Benjamin's arms in their little cabin, Amelia felt a peace and contentment she had never known. "I never imagined I could be this happy," she whispered. "Neither did I," Benjamin murmured, pressing a kiss to her forehead, "though I am grateful every day that I happened to be riding down that road the night you needed help." "Do you think it was chance?" Amelia asked. "Or something more?" "I think you were brave enough to stand up for what was right, and that courage led you to the life you were meant to live. The rest of us were just fortunate enough to be part of it." As winter settled over Idaho, Amelia discovered the joys and challenges of being a ranch wife. She continued helping Mrs. Miller, who was slowly regaining her strength, but she also learned to manage her own small household. Benjamin taught her to shoot, insisting she needed to know how to protect herself when he was out on the range. She proved to be a surprisingly good shot, much to his delight. The ranch community became her family. She helped deliver a baby when one of the workers' wives went into labor during a snowstorm and the doctor could not get through. She nursed sick children through winter colds, taught reading and writing to anyone who wanted to learn, and became known as someone people could turn to for help or advice. Benjamin proved to be everything he had promised and more. He never made a major decision without consulting her, treated her as a true partner, and made her laugh even on the hardest days. He was patient and kind and passionate, and she fell more in love with him as each month passed. In early spring, Amelia realized she was pregnant. The news filled her with both joy and terror. She had always wanted children, but she could not help thinking about her own family, about the mother who had chosen her husband over her daughter, about the father who had cast her out. What kind of parent would she be? Benjamin, when she told him, wrapped her in his arms and held her while she cried out her fears. "You are nothing like your father," he said firmly. "You are kind and brave and principled. Our children will grow up knowing they are loved for who they are, not for how well they obey or how little they question. They will learn from you that speaking truth matters more than keeping false peace." His words gave her courage, and as her body changed and the baby grew inside her, she found herself excited about the future in a way she never had been before. Mrs. Miller fussed over her, insisting she rest more and not work too hard. The other ranch wives shared their wisdom and their stories, making her feel less alone in the mystery of impending motherhood. Benjamin was attentive without being overbearing, his hand often resting protectively on her growing belly, his eyes full of wonder at the life they had created together. One warm day in May, nearly a year after she had walked away from her father's house, Amelia was hanging laundry outside the cabin when she saw a wagon approaching on the ranch road. As it drew closer, her heart nearly stopped. It was her father's wagon, driven by one of his men, and in the back sat Catherine and Dorothy. She stood frozen as the wagon pulled up in front of the main house. Mr. Miller came out, and there was a brief conversation. Then, to her shock, her sisters climbed down from the wagon, and the driver handed down 2 large trunks before turning the wagon around and heading back the way he had come. Catherine and Dorothy stood uncertainly in the yard until they saw Amelia, and then they both ran to her, all 3 sisters crying and embracing. "What happened?" Amelia finally managed to ask. "Why are you here?" Catherine, who at 19 had grown even more beautiful in the past year, wiped her eyes. "Father arranged a marriage for me, to a man 40 years older, cruel, and known for his temper. I refused. Dorothy stood with me, said if he forced me to marry that man, she would never forgive him. Mother finally found her voice and said she could not watch another daughter be sacrificed to father's pride and greed." "He cast us all out?" Amelia asked, horrified. "No," Dorothy, now 16, said with a trace of satisfaction. "Mother is still there. She told father that if he sent us away, she would leave him and make it known throughout the territory why. She would expose his business practices, his cruelty. She said she had been silent too long. Father backed down from forcing the marriage, but Catherine and I decided we could not stay. We have been planning for weeks, saving money, and when we told Mother we wanted to come find you, she helped us. Father does not know. He thinks we are visiting an aunt in Boise. But when he finds out, Amelia began. Mother will handle him, Catherine said with more confidence than Amelia had ever heard from her. She is changing, Amelia. Your courage, your willingness to give up everything for what you believed, it has been working on her all this time. She is not ready to leave Father, but she is no longer willing to be completely silent. Amelia felt tears streaming down her face again. You are both here. You are really here. If you will have us, Dorothy said. We do not want to be a burden, but we could not stay there anymore. Not after we saw what you did, how you built a new life. We want that too. To live with integrity, even if it means living with less. Of course I will have you, Amelia said fiercely. You are my sisters. We will figure it out. Mr. Miller, who had been standing back, giving them privacy, cleared his throat. Mrs. Baker, if your sisters need work and a place to stay, we can always use more help around here. The bunkhouse has been converted to house some of the families, and we have another cabin that needs some fixing up, but could be made livable. They would earn their keep, of course. We are not afraid of work, Catherine said quickly. We are strong, and we learn fast. That evening, the cabin was crowded but full of warmth as Amelia introduced her sisters to Benjamin, who welcomed them with the same steady kindness he showed everyone. They talked late into the night, Catherine and Dorothy telling stories of life at the ranch after Amelia left, of the growing tension between their parents, of their own awakening to the injustices they had been raised to ignore. The workers' children started getting sick this winter, Catherine said, her face troubled. The shelters Father houses them in are not weatherproof, and 2 children nearly died of pneumonia. Mother went out to see them against Father's orders, and when she came back, she was different. She started insisting Father make repairs, improve conditions. He refused, but she would not let it go. She is fighting in her own way, Dorothy added. Not as bravely as you did, but she is trying. Sometimes courage grows slowly, Benjamin said thoughtfully. Your mother spent years learning to be silent. Learning to speak will take time. Over the next weeks, Catherine and Dorothy settled into ranch life. The cabin Mr. Miller had mentioned was cleaned and repaired, and the sisters moved into it together. Emma Miller took them under her wing, teaching them the skills they would need to make their way in the world. Catherine proved to have a gift with horses and began working with the ranch's string of riding horses, while Dorothy surprised everyone with her aptitude for managing accounts and inventory. Both sisters adapted to their new life with a determination that made Amelia proud. They complained less than she had expected and worked harder. They laughed more freely than they ever had under their father's roof, and the worry lines that had formed on their young faces began to fade. In late summer, when the heat lay heavy over the valley, Amelia went into labor. Benjamin stayed by her side through the long hours, holding her hand, wiping her forehead with cool water, never flinching even when she squeezed his hand hard enough to bruise. Emma Miller served as midwife, competent and calm, and when dawn broke over the mountains, Amelia gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Thomas after Benjamin's father. Holding her son for the first time, Amelia was overwhelmed by the fierce protective love that surged through her. This child would grow up knowing he was valued for who he was, not what he could do for others. He would learn kindness and courage, justice and integrity. He would be raised to question, rather than blindly obey, to stand up for what was right even when it was hard. Benjamin held his son with tears in his eyes, his large, work-roughened hands cradling the infant with infinite gentleness. He is perfect, he whispered. He is ours, Amelia said. And in that simple word was everything they had built together, everything they promised to give this child and any others who might follow. Catherine and Dorothy doted on their nephew, taking turns holding him and helping Amelia during those exhausting first weeks. The entire ranch community celebrated the new baby, bringing gifts and food and offers of help. Amelia felt surrounded by love in a way she never had growing up, even with all her father's wealth and status. When Thomas was 2 months old, a letter arrived from her mother. Amelia opened it with shaking hands, unsure what to expect. The letter was brief but significant. My dearest daughters, I have taken steps I should have taken long ago. I have separated my finances from your father's and established my own accounts. I have hired a lawyer to represent the interests of the workers on the ranch, though I have done this quietly, and your father does not yet know. I am working to improve conditions, one small victory at a time. It is not enough, not nearly enough to make up for my years of silence, but it is a beginning. Catherine and Dorothy, I miss you terribly, but I am proud of your courage. Amelia, you started this by refusing to be silent. I hope someday you can forgive me for not being stronger sooner. I hope to meet my grandson when circumstances allow. With love, your mother. Amelia read the letter aloud to Benjamin and her sisters, all of them gathered in the main cabin. When she finished, there was silence. She is trying, Catherine finally said. It is more than I expected. It is more than we have any right to expect, Dorothy added. Father must be furious. She is still there, Amelia said slowly. Still fighting from within. Maybe that takes as much courage as leaving did. Benjamin squeezed her shoulder. Maybe different situations require different kinds of courage. What matters is that she found hers, even if it took time. As autumn painted the mountains in shades of red and gold, Amelia reflected on how much had changed in barely more than a year. She had lost one family and found another. She had discovered strengths she never knew she possessed. She had built a life based on principle rather than privilege, and while it was harder in many ways, it was infinitely more satisfying. Benjamin proved to be a wonderful father, patient and playful with Thomas, even after long days working on the ranch. Amelia watched him teaching their son to smile, to reach for things, and later to crawl, and her heart felt so full she thought it might burst. Mr. Miller took Benjamin aside one day and offered him a partnership in the ranch. The older man had no children of his own, and he had come to trust Benjamin's judgment and work ethic completely. Benjamin came home that evening with a proposal. If Amelia agreed, they would accept Mr. Miller's offer and build a house on the property, something bigger than the cabin, a place to raise their growing family. What do you think? He asked, watching her face anxiously. It would mean committing to staying here, putting down deep roots. I know you once dreamed of traveling, of seeing more of the world. Amelia looked around the cabin that had been their first home, at her son sleeping peacefully in his cradle, at her husband whose love had given her the courage to become who she was meant to be. I have seen enough of the world to know that home is not a place. It is people. These people, this community, this life we are building together. That is the world I want to know deeply. They built the house together the following spring, everyone on the ranch contributing labor and skills. It was a modest but sturdy two-story structure with a wide porch and large windows that let in the light. They had a proper parlor, a large kitchen, and 4 bedrooms upstairs, space for the family they hoped to have. Catherine surprised everyone by falling in love with one of the ranch hands, a quiet man named James who had a way with horses that matched her own. They married that summer in the same church where Amelia and Benjamin had wed, and Catherine glowed with happiness in her simple wedding dress. Dorothy, more interested in education than romance, announced her intention to go to the new teachers' college in Boise. She had saved her wages carefully, and with some help from Amelia and Benjamin, she enrolled that fall. She came home during holidays full of stories about her studies and her dreams of becoming a teacher, of helping other young women get educations. In the spring of 1888, Amelia gave birth to twin girls. Benjamin had hoped for daughters, and his joy at having 2 at once was unbounded. They named them Elizabeth and Emma, the latter after Mrs. Miller, who had become like a mother to Amelia. The older woman, now fully recovered from her illness, was deeply touched by the honor. Thomas, now 2.5, was enchanted by his baby sisters and would sit by their cradles for hours, talking to them in his own toddler language. Amelia watched her children growing and felt grateful beyond measure for the life she had built, so different from the one she had been born into. One late summer evening when the twins were 4 months old, a rider arrived at the ranch with news from Caldwell. Charles Wells had died suddenly of a heart ailment. The funeral had been held, and Margaret Wells was asking to see her daughters. The news hit Amelia with unexpected force. She had imagined this moment many times, had rehearsed what she would feel, but the reality was more complicated. Relief that he could no longer hurt anyone mingled with grief for the father he might have been. Anger at the years of cruelty mixed with sadness for a man who had died without ever understanding love or compassion. Benjamin held her while she cried, offering no platitudes, just his steady presence. "Do you want to go see your mother?" he finally asked. "Yes," Amelia said, "but I want you to come with me. All of us together." They made the journey to Caldwell as a family, with Catherine and James joining them. The grand house where Amelia had grown up looked the same from the outside, but when they entered, everything felt different, smaller somehow and darker, despite all the expensive furnishings. Margaret Wells looked 10 years older than she was, worn down by grief and perhaps by guilt. But when she saw her daughters and met her grandchildren for the first time, her face transformed. She held Thomas gently, cooed over the twin girls, embraced Catherine and Dorothy with tears streaming down her face. "I have been such a fool," she said quietly. "I wasted so many years being afraid, choosing comfort over conscience." Charles died angry and bitter, surrounded by wealth, but with no one who truly loved him. That is what his cruelty bought him in the end. "You are choosing differently now," Amelia said. "That matters." Margaret had indeed been making changes. The workers' housing had been improved dramatically, wages increased, and she had established a small school for the workers' children. It was not enough to undo years of harm, but it was significant. "I am selling most of the ranch," Margaret told them, "keeping only what I need to live comfortably. The rest I am dividing between you, 3 girls, and using a portion to establish a fund for the workers who suffered under your father's management. It is the least I can do." "You could come live with us," Amelia offered impulsively. "There is room in the new house." But Margaret shook her head. "Thank you, my dear, but I have work to do here. I spent years being complicit in cruelty. I need to spend whatever time I have left trying to make amends. Perhaps someday, when I have done what I can here, I will take you up on that offer." They stayed in Caldwell for 3 days, and by the time they left, something had healed between mother and daughters. It was not perfect, and the scars of the past remained, but there was a foundation now for building something new. The years that followed were full and happy. Benjamin and Mr. Miller expanded the ranch operations, always maintaining the principles of fair treatment and decent wages that set them apart from many other operations. Their reputation for integrity brought them good workers and steady business. Thomas grew into a thoughtful, curious boy who loved books as much as his mother did and who followed his father around the ranch, learning everything he could. Elizabeth and Emma were inseparable, twin spirits who brought laughter and chaos in equal measure. When they were 3, Amelia gave birth to another son, William, and 2 years later, a daughter they named Margaret after the grandmother who had finally found her courage. Catherine and James had 2 children of their own and built a house near Amelia and Benjamin's. Dorothy finished her studies and returned to teach at the school in Caldwell, though she visited the ranch often, delighting her nieces and nephews with stories and lessons. She eventually married a lawyer she met in Boise, a man who shared her passion for education and justice. Margaret Wells did eventually come to live at the ranch when she was in her 60s and ready to pass the management of her remaining property to someone else. She became a beloved grandmother to all the children, teaching them skills and sharing stories, always encouraging them to think for themselves and stand up for what was right. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Benjamin took Amelia back to the meadow where he had proposed. The children were with their grandmother for the afternoon, and they rode out alone as they had done so long ago. "Do you ever regret it?" Benjamin asked as they stood looking out over the valley. "Giving up the life you were born to?" Amelia looked at him with all the love she felt. I gave up a life that was never really mine for one that I chose. I gave up comfort for integrity, privilege for purpose, and I gained everything that truly matters. You, our children, this community, this life built on truth and love and courage. How could I possibly regret that? He pulled her close, and they stood together watching the sun set over the mountains. Two people who had found each other when she needed help most and had built something beautiful from courage and truth. As the years passed and their children grew, Amelia and Benjamin made sure to teach them the lessons they had learned. That speaking truth takes courage, but silence in the face of injustice is worse. That how we treat others, especially those with less power, defines our character. That love is not about control, but about mutual respect and partnership. That family is not just blood, but the people who stand by you when standing is hardest. Thomas grew up to be a veterinarian, dedicated to helping ranchers care for their animals. Elizabeth became a teacher like her Aunt Dorothy, while Emma surprised everyone by developing a passion for law and becoming one of the first female lawyers in Idaho. William took over the ranch operations from his father, maintaining the principles that had always guided it, and young Margaret became a writer, documenting the stories of the West with honesty and compassion. On their 25th wedding anniversary, surrounded by children and grandchildren, Amelia and Benjamin reflected on the journey that had brought them together. From that night on a dark road when a cowboy had stopped to help a woman in need, to this moment surrounded by the family and community they had built together, it had been a life lived with purpose and love. Speaking truth takes courage, Benjamin said softly, echoing the words he had spoken to her so long ago. But you had that courage from the beginning. All I did was recognize it and feel honored to stand beside it. You gave me the space to be brave, Amelia corrected. You believed in me when my own family could not. You built a life with me where courage and integrity matter more than wealth or status. That is the greatest gift anyone could have given me. As the sun set over the Idaho mountains on that anniversary evening, with the sound of children's laughter filling the air and the warmth of family all around them, Amelia thought about that terrified young woman who had walked away from everything she knew because she could not stay silent in the face of injustice. That woman had thought she was losing everything, but instead, she had found the life she was meant to live and the love she was meant to share. The Wild West had tested them with its harsh conditions and rough justice, but it had also given them space to build something true and lasting. They had raised their children to be kind but strong, to work hard but treat others fairly, to love deeply and stand up for what is right. And as their grandchildren played in the yard of the home they had built together, Amelia knew that the courage it had taken to speak truth all those years ago had created ripples that would continue long after she was gone. Benjamin took her hand, his grip still strong despite the years of hard work that had weathered his hands, and she squeezed back, their connection as deep and true as it had been from the very beginning. They had built a legacy not of wealth or power, but of integrity, courage, and love that would endure for generations. Years later, when Amelia was an old woman with silver hair and grandchildren who brought their own children to visit, she would tell the story of that night on the road when everything changed. She would describe the fear and the courage, the loss and the gain, and most of all, the cowboy who had stopped to help and had spoken words that changed her life forever. Speaking truth takes courage, she would tell the wide-eyed children gathered around her, but the courage to speak truth is nothing without people who will listen, who will stand beside you, who will build a life with you based on those truths. Your grandfather was that person for me, and together we built something that I hope you will carry forward. Benjamin, sitting in his rocking chair beside her, would smile and add his own wisdom. And remember that courage comes in many forms. Sometimes it is standing up to injustice. Sometimes it is building something new. Sometimes it is simply choosing love over fear every single day. Your grandmother taught me that, and together we tried to live it. They had been blessed with long lives, long enough to see their children grown and successful, their grandchildren established in their own lives, and even their great-grandchildren beginning to make their way in the world. The ranch prospered under William's management, still maintaining the principles that Benjamin and Mr. Miller had established so long ago. When Benjamin passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 82, with Amelia holding his hand, she grieved deeply but without regret. They had had 58 years together, years filled with love and purpose, challenge and triumph. She had been blessed beyond measure, and she knew it. She lived another 3 years, spending her time with her children and grandchildren, writing letters full of wisdom and love, tending the garden Benjamin had planted for her, and sitting on the porch of the house they had built together, watching the sun set over the mountains that had witnessed their entire life together. On a warm evening in early summer, surrounded by 3 generations of family, Amelia Wells Baker closed her eyes for the last time. Her final words were ones of gratitude, thanking her children for the joy they had brought her, thanking Benjamin for the life they had shared, thanking God for the courage to speak truth when it mattered most. They buried her beside Benjamin on a hill overlooking the ranch, under a sky so vast and blue it seemed to go on forever. The entire community turned out for the funeral, testifying to a life well lived, to courage and integrity, to love that had transformed not just one family but an entire community. Thomas, now himself an old man, spoke at his mother's funeral about the legacy she had left. "My mother taught us that speaking truth takes courage, but living truth takes even more. She showed us how to build a life of integrity, how to stand up for what is right, even when it costs us dearly, how to love deeply and forgive when possible. She was cast out for speaking against injustice, and instead of becoming bitter, she built something beautiful. That is the legacy she leaves us, and it is our responsibility to carry it forward." The ranch continued to prosper, generation after generation, maintaining the principles that Amelia and Benjamin had established. The story of the woman who was cast out for speaking truth and the cowboy who recognized her courage and built a life with her became a family legend passed down through the years. And on quiet evenings, when the wind blew across the Idaho prairie and the sun set over the mountains in shades of purple and gold, people swore they could still feel the presence of that love, that courage, that unwavering commitment to truth and justice that had defined 2 remarkable lives and had created something that would last forever. The legacy of Amelia Wells Baker and Benjamin Baker lived on in their descendants, in the ranch they had built, in the community they had fostered, and in the countless lives they had touched with their courage and their love. They had proven that speaking truth, though it requires great courage, opens the door to a life of meaning and purpose that no amount of wealth or privilege could ever provide. And so their story became part of the Wild West's history, not a tale of gunfights or gold rushes, but something far more valuable, a story of courage, integrity, and a love built on mutual respect and shared values that had transformed 2 lives and rippled out to touch countless others across generations. It was a reminder that the greatest adventures are often not about conquering territory, but about conquering fear, not about gaining wealth, but about building character, not about power over others, but about partnership with them. In the end, Amelia had been right that terrible evening when she walked away from her father's house. Speaking truth had taken courage, but that courage had led her to everything that truly mattered, and she and Benjamin had built a life together that was worth far more than anything she had left behind.